Hi guys. Our lesson this morning is called The Widow's Oil. And so we're just going to get started. Um, this is the story of a poor widow who needed God's help. She needed help because she owed a lot of money. The man to whom she owed the money knew she couldn't pay, but he knew another way she could pay him. He would take the widow's 2 sons as his slaves. The widow's husband had been a man of God, but he owed money when he died, and now the widow couldn't pay the bill. Um, and in Bible times, there weren't really any jobs that women could do to get paid for. Um, and so the widow went to see Elisha. She knew that if anyone could help, it would be God's prophet. The widow told Elisha, "Your servant, my husband, is dead. You know he honored the Lord, but now the man he owes money to is coming to take my 2 boys as slaves." "How can I help you?" Elisha asked. "What do you have in your house?" The woman was poor. All she owned was a little olive oil. But God could use that little bit of oil to perform a big miracle. Elisha said, "Ask your neighbors for empty jars. Do not ask for just a few, then shut the door. Pour oil in all the jars." The widow trusted God. She went home and obeyed him. The widow and her sons collected all of the pots that they could. When all the pots were in the house, the widow shut the door just as Elisha had told her to. Now no one could bother the widow and her sons as they poured oil. The widow began to pour. She filled one jar, she filled another, she filled jar after jar, and her oil did not run out. God made the oil from her only jar fill many, many jars. Usually, as you pour from a jar, it becomes empty, but that didn't happen to the widow. The oil kept pouring and pouring and pouring and pouring, and all the borrowed jars became full. But the first jar never became empty. That was a miracle. And finally, the widow said to her sons, "Bring me another jar." Her sons looked around. "There aren't any left," one son said. God had filled all of the jars. The widow went to see Elisha. The widow told Elisha what had happened. "Go sell the oil and pay your debt," Elisha said. "You can live on the rest of the money." And so the woman sold the oil. The oil gave her enough money to pay the man who wanted to make her sons slaves. Imagine how happy the widow was. Now her sons wouldn't be slaves. Now she had money for food and clothes and a home to live in. God did not just meet the widow's need to pay off a debt and keep her sons from being slaves. God met all the woman's needs as she obeyed God's instructions. God has not changed. He still meets our needs today as we obey him and ask him for his help. All right, guys, I have a little bit of a challenge for you. Since today was about God meeting our needs, I want you to draw a jar as best you can. It doesn't have to be fancy. And on around the jar, I want you to write 3 needs that God has met for you. So it could be clothes, it could be food, it could be a house, it could be water, or it could be anything that you need that God has provided for you. A loving family, good friends, all of those things are things that God provides for us. So I want you to draw a pot and write as many as you can think of, even if it's only 3 or 4. But I want you to write down 3 or 4 things that God has provided for you. All right, guys, see you next week.